All right. So I always start the podcast with the same question I ask everyone. So when people tell you to be your authentic self, or when you hear the word authenticity, what comes to mind for you? What does that mean?
Oh, I love that question. So for me, authenticity means being exactly who I was called to be. It's bringing my full self. One of the things that I say about being my full self is that I'm actually funny, which people don't get to see that part of me. They always see the serious business side of me, but I'm actually really funny. At least I think that I am. And I talk a lot about my personal experience. Being authentic is being open and transparent and being able to share your experiences with people so that you can connect. I am a big time networker. I am into building rapport, and the only way that I can really build rapport with people is by being able to share my experiences and seeing that there is synergy in what I've gone through with what people have gone through.
I love that your answer in your mind automatically went to things that aren't necessarily appearance based, because that a lot of times that's where people's minds go. Obviously, it has a factor into it, but you went into just like your personality and who you are, and things that aren't necessarily surface level. That's so interesting. Um, when do you feel most comfortable being yourself and sharing your experiences and doing all of those things? Is it consistent across the board, or are there certain situations?
That's such a good question, Pavel. So, when do I feel most comfortable? For a long time, I thought that I felt most comfortable amongst other Latinas or other Latinos. And then I realized that's not where I am most comfortable being myself. To be honest, I'm most comfortable in spaces where most people wouldn't really find me in or think that I would fit in, because I have the opportunity to teach people about my culture, about who I am, about Latinidad. And so for me, that's where I feel most comfortable when it comes to other Latinos and stuff like that. Como que me siento that there's a lot of let me one up you on what I'm doing, on what I'm saying, on what's going on in my life, and who's the better Latino. And I don't like that. And so for me, I tend to when it comes to those situations, I tend to fall back a little just so that I could observe, and then I can say, okay, this is where I'm gonna come in. This is where I'm gonna contribute in the conversation.
That's so interesting. I've heard that so many times in different levels. Like I have
Uh-huh.
friends that don't, like, they say they don't feel Dominican enough, right? Because their Spanish is decent, but they go into certain situations with like other Latinos and Latinas, and they're like, oh fuck, comparing themselves to that.
Right. The thing is that we tend to criticize one another way too much in our culture. And so when you say I'm not Dominican enough, oh my God, ¿cuántas veces yo he escuchado eso? Like, especially when people feel that they don't manage the language well, just because you don't speak Spanish well doesn't mean that it discredits the fact that you are Dominican or of Dominican heritage, of whatever Latino heritage that you are from. What it says is that you just need to work on your Spanish, but it's not the person who speaks the best Spanish that is able to build rapport or communicate well with others. Is the one that really understands and can bring their authentic self, like you started off with, to the conversation.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I'm so interested to uncover, like, where did this all start for you, right? Like, maybe we can start around like where you grew up and like what that experience was like, because you mentioned, I feel most comfortable around like a certain group and not necessarily like around other Latinos or Latinas. Like, was that always the case maybe when you were growing up?
No, so I came to the United States when I was 6 years old from Dominican Republic. So I was born in Santo Domingo, and I came here when I was six with my twin sister. We are the youngest of six girls, by the way. So there are six women, and we were that. Oops, we didn't know we could still have kids, and so we literally grew up with our nieces and nephews. And so when I came here to the U.S., what happened was that we first moved to Newark, New Jersey. So in New Jersey, hey.
Yay.
And so we moved to Newark, and we were in a Latino environment, but we were only there for about 4 years. And then we ended up moving to a town called East Orange. And East Orange is a predominantly African American town. And so I had a really tough time. We were there until about seventh grade. I had a really tough time in East Orange. And it's because, first of all, Spanish was my first language, even though now I dominate English just as well as I do Spanish because I'm fluent in both. But it was tough because we were Latinas and we were the first Latinas in the area. Being able to identify with them and connect with them was tough because we weren't Black enough to be considered Black or part of the group, right? And when we were in Newark, when we first came here, we were also like the darkest ones in our class, and we weren't white enough to be Latinos, what the Latinos look like when we were growing up in that area. And so for a very long time, I suffered from the imposter syndrome, believe it or not. My sister and I, we suffered from the imposter syndrome because we didn't know where we fit in. We just didn't know where we fit in. And so we found ourselves, especially me, I found myself being more chameleon like and trying to adopt, you know, the mannerisms, even the language of the place that I was in so that I can fit in. But no matter how hard I tried, I just didn't fit in. It just didn't happen. People weren't accepting us. And it wasn't, to be honest, it wasn't until years later, I'm going to tell you, it wasn't until maybe 6 years ago that I decided I'm just going to be me, and it doesn't matter what my surroundings look like, who I'm around, what other people think of me. You know, for a very long time, I wear my hair natural. So now we're gonna go into the uh, into the superficial part of it. I wear my
Mhm.
hair natural now. For a very long time, I didn't. Desde chiquita, my mom would perm my hair, you know, to
Mhm.
straighten my hair because curly hair wasn't considered professional or the standard of beauty. The standard of beauty was a more European look, which was, you know, the straightening of the hair and just speaking a certain way so that I would be more acceptable because my language could tend to be a little colloquial. And so I had to work on that as well. And I said, a mí qué me importa lo que diga la gente? Like, what do I care? And to be honest, the transition of when I started to accept myself and be authentic and be me was after I got divorced, to be honest. Because even when I think about it, even in that marriage, there were certain expectations that were placed over me. I literally went from having nothing to having it all and being in a place where, you know, I was financially independent. We were doing extremely well, but in order to maintain la apariencia, right, so that
Yeah.
I could fit in with everybody else, I had to look a certain way. I had to dress a certain way. I literally was in the salon every 3 days getting my hair straightened.
Wow. I mean,
And
when you sorry, go for it.
no, 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 you could go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, you spoke a lot about like expectations. Where do you think those expectations come from? Like, do you think it was like a story you were telling yourself, or did you hear certain people tell you that it had to be a certain way? Like your hair, for example, or like this appearance, not necessarily Europeans, but more so like the appearance that we put out in the community, right?
So you know what I'm gonna tell you? It started since I was little. There was this expectation. It came from my own family, especially my
Yeah.
mom. You know, for my mom, you know, curly hair. When she sees my hair now, for her, it's like I look like a wet mop to her.
Yeah.
And this is a belief that my mom grew up with, which is sad. You know, we have we so our background, we have Spaniard, right, in our background. And so my mom's grandmother era española, she was from Spain. I know on my father's side as well. And so for them, there is this certain sense of pride for some reason that there is this part of you that is connected to Spain and to the European part. And for some reason, they want to hold on to that and the
Yeah.
standards that came with that. And so it was put on us. It was placed on us, those expectations, which are so erroneous. They're so wrong, because what ends up happening is that it created a lot of limiting beliefs inside of me. My sister is a little lighter than me, and I always heard that my sister was prettier than me, more beautiful than me. My sister has wavy hair. I have super curly, almost kinky hair. And so my sister was always considered more prettier than me. And so all of these standards of beauty that were placed on me literally created limiting beliefs, because I started to compare myself to other people, which was wrong and it was not good. And so I was in this hamster wheel of, oh my gosh, I have to look a certain way. I have to do certain things. I have to say certain things because people don't think that I fit the standard of beauty. And so it was tough. It was challenging. And that's something that we repeat. I'm not the only person. I see it with my girlfriends who are Latina, especially Afro Latina. And so it's
Hmm.
something that we grew up with in our families.
Yeah, it's not just you at all, for sure. I definitely want to recognize that because that's something that I hear all the time as well. I mean, I'm not a woman, obviously, but my mom tells me for like a guy. Like I remember my grandfather growing up would tell me, "Do you see CEOs? Do you see CEOs with tattoos? Do you see them with beards?" I remember there was one point, like I'm still into hip hop, and I was into it back then, and at a young age, like we're so malleable. So I saw 50 Cent with a do rag walking outside. I'm like, I want to wear a do rag outside. My grandfather was like, "Do you see anybody do that?" No, right? So like he like instilled this image or just like this idea around what professionalism is, and just like you, I think for me it was like really shaped at an early age.
Yeah, but my whole thing is, who says that listening to hip hop isn't
Hmm.
professional? Like,
Exactly.
who says that? Who
Exactly.
created that? I want to understand who created that. Who says that? We create our own beliefs, right? And our own expectations. The problem is that we take on beliefs and expectations of others. And so we place that on ourselves, and which is the wrong thing to do. Because one of the things that I learned is, like putting an invisible shield around me and saying, hold on a second, I'm not a receptacle, not a trash receptacle. I'm not going to take on all of your garbage, right? Because I have enough going on in my life and I have enough limiting beliefs that I have to already get rid of, but I'm not going to take on yours. The problem is that because we are so malleable when we are young, that we accept these things to be truth, right? And we hold on to it and we put it on like a cape, right? And that becomes like our superpower cape of negative beliefs, what everybody else has placed on top of us.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, you mentioned that you were experiencing that, and it took you, years to get to a point where you were just like, fuck it, I'm gonna be myself. But it was
Mhm.
interesting, you mentioned marriage and your divorce, and that was like the moment for you. Did it
Yeah.
have to, can you talk a little bit about that and why?
Sure. So what happened was that I was at a point of transition. I ended up getting divorced just because things weren't working out. So as a woman, you have to know. It's so funny because I was saying this the other day to a client where I was telling them, you have to know when to walk away and when you have overstayed your welcome, whether it's in business and a job that you are not moving in, or in a relationship. And I was literally in a relationship where I realized that, my worth and my value just was not being respected, and also my integrity. And I had to make a decision to walk away, and to walk away not only from the marriage itself, but also from everything that we had built together. Because I went from not having anything to having it all, and then making a decision like, hey, this isn't working out for me. I need to walk away from this. And people saying, oh my God, you're crazy. You're a millionaire. How are you going to walk away from this? And I said, no, the thing is, when you know who you are and whose you are, right? because I'm a woman of faith. And I say, when you know whose you are, and you
Mm,
know that you are worthy and that you are valuable, and somebody is not seeing that, then it's time to cut the cord and it's time to walk away. And I was in a point of transition where I didn't know. I didn't quite know who I was, because for a very long time, Pavel, I thought that my identity was connected to my marriage.
yeah.
I literally had lost myself. And we tend to do that a lot in relationships. And to be honest, um, I had acquired all this knowledge and skill sets, and I had gone back to school, gotten an MBA, I had multiple certifications. And I remember the day that I walked away, I thought I had nothing. I didn't. When you are in a place where mentally you feel like you're not worthy, you're not good enough, you will convince yourself of a lie. And the lie is that you don't have anything, and that you aren't valuable, and that you don't have any skill sets, and it's a lie. I had like this cadre of of certifications and an MBA and a bachelor's, and I didn't know what my next was going to be. I didn't know what to do. That's how bad, and that's how bad I was mentally. And it was a lie, because I had a lot. I had a lot, and I had a lot to give. And it literally took going to therapy and getting coaching, which I know is taboo in our culture to even talk about it. No. La persona que va, to therapy or who gets coaching is because you're crazy. That's
Hmm.
not true. I needed help. And I remember getting up one day feeling so bad with myself, because I thought I was a failure. I failed in my head, I failed in my marriage. I had also failed at a startup that I had launched, a tech startup that I lost $250,000 in. I felt like a complete failure. And I remember saying, I need help. I
Yeah.
need help, because I don't know what's my next. I don't know how to move on from this. And I remember saying, I'm going to go get a therapist. And I did. And then I said,
That's
I'm going to go get a coach. And I did.
I love that you did that. It's so interesting, and I agree. The fact that it happens in relationships a lot, but I think it happens in so many other parts of our lives where like our identities essentially are titles,
Yeah.
and I think it comes back to maybe like the questions that we're accustomed to being asked. Right,
Mhm.
it's like around the holiday season, it's y el novio season, right, or like
Uh-huh.
y la novia season, right? Because that you just
Yep.
get asked that at every holiday. I don't know if you get this too, but in New York in particular, it's the question I guess asked all the time, and maybe because it's just like there's a lot of money in New York, but it's like, what do you do
Oh my goodness. That's
every
the
time?
question.
Yeah, and I would get it. It took me until I got to Facebook,
Mhm.
because before Facebook, I worked for. I mean, I thought they were good companies, but like no one knew who they were. You know what I mean? They were like tech companies, but they were really small. So
Right.
like I used to hate when people asked me that, and it
Mhm.
wasn't until I started working at Facebook when I was like, oh, I can't wait for somebody to ask me that. But now I feel like I am stuck in a way, because I feel like I can never leave Facebook because I'm so insecure that if someone asks me that and I don't have that like
Title.
that title, right? And I say I'm an entrepreneur, people are going to have this judgment on me. You know what I mean? And like, I want to get into that later for you for sure.
I
Um,
love that you said that. Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
You went through that too?
Oh my goodness. Listen.
Let's just get into it now. Yeah.
Listen, we're just going to jump into this right now. Yes, I experienced that because, like I told you, I was in a very successful,
Hmm.
in a successful place, and this marriage afforded me opportunities in different spaces where I literally was out there. My name was known, his name was known, and so leaving that whole space, people were like, "Oh, but you're not there anymore. You're not doing X anymore." It's like I lost my value and my worth because I wasn't attached to this thing, right? To this business, to this marriage. So it happens in every space. You are absolutely correct. The question that you have to ask yourself is, why do you care? Why are you so invested in a title? Who you are has nothing to do with who you're with what company you work for, with if you have kids or not, or a girlfriend or a husband. It has everything to do with who you believe you were meant to be, right? If you are living with purpose, si tu carácter is somebody of integrity, of morals, right? Who you are can never be connected. And this is something that I learned in my point of transition when I was going through therapy and going through coaching. You know, I had to learn that who I was had nothing to do with my past or anything that I had done or any titles that I had acquired or any company that I was associated with. Who I am doesn't change. In essence, who you are, Pavel, never changes, right? If a relationship ceases to exist, you don't stop being you.
Yeah.
If you are no longer in Facebook, Pavel, you don't stop being you.
Yeah.
If you are no longer attached to a cause that you don't believe in, you don't stop being you. You don't.
I no, I appreciate that, and it's something I have to tell myself all the time. I mean, granted, I like where I work, I like my job, but it's a thought that comes to mind. And for transparency, I go to therapy as well. I go to therapy every week. Actually, my therapist has been on maternity leave. I cannot wait for her to get back. I got a lot to talk to her about. Shout out to my girl Jody. But yeah, like I learned a ton in therapy. I think my biggest thing was that I didn't know how to communicate my emotions to
Uh-huh.
people. That was my biggest challenge, as well as just dealing with anxiety, right? Like all these stories that I create in my head, which many times isn't true. What about for you? Like what was that growth like, or like what were some lessons that you learned?
So one of the things that I learned is to be tough. I grew up in a family where we were six girls, but um, so my parents have been, so I'm just going to put this out there. My parents have been married 60 years. We just celebrated the 60 years. But I
Wow.
grew up with parents who grew up in the era of Trujillo.
Hmm.
And so, they grew up with a lot of lack. They grew up with a lot of fear. They grew up with a lot of stuff. So, one of the things that they taught us as women was to be very self sufficient and to be independent, but also not to cry, not to whine, right? Because we haven't been through what they went through in the era of Trujillo. I don't know why they love to repeat that. It's like, oh my gosh, you're complaining and you're crying about something, but you have no idea what we went through. So it was like, suck it up, buttercup, and put your big girl panties on and don't show emotion. You got to work through it. And so I think that's one of the things that people who see me and people who know me, it was tough for me to even cry or to share my emotions or what I was going through, because I am notorious for being super private about my life and about how I feel. And so for a very long time, I used to pretend and put this picture like everything was perfect, everything was great, and it wasn't true. And I, just like you, I had to learn to get rid of and talk about what was going on and about my emotions, because it was making me sick. Do you know that holding on to emotions, trapped emotions, will cause dis-ease? It will produce
Mm,
diseases inside of you. And I tell you this because I studied meta-medicine through my certification process as a coach. It's one of the things that I studied. And what meta-medicine says is that the if you are experiencing something in your body, there is an emotion that's connected to it, that's connected to a traumatic experience or something that you're going through. There is a
wow.
root in that. And so for a very long time, I was suffering from so many stress related disorders. And so that's one of the reasons that I went to get, therapy, because my doctor was like, you're suffering from all these things. And clearly I could tell you're under extreme duress. You need to go to therapy. You need to go and talk to somebody. The minute I did, like this, things just started to disappear. Letting go, talking, things just started to disappear. But it's like I told you before, for some reason, there's this taboo in the Latino community about therapy. There's this stigma with it. And so I want to ask you a question as a man. Why
Yeah.
is it so difficult for men to share, their emotions? Why is it that for a guy it's not okay? It's expected for a woman to break down and cry, but it's not expected for a guy. And it's seen as, oh my God, you're too weak. There's like all these different negative connotations with a man sharing it. So I would love to know why.
Yeah, I kind of wish I knew too, but uh I think growing up there is I mean, so thinking about growing up, I like my mom or like all right, so I grew up with my mom and my two grandparents. So I didn't grow up with my father. They were separated and I never heard growing up like don't cry, as some people say like be tough. I never heard that, but I also never saw a lot of emotion growing up. Like I wasn't hugged that often. Like my family, their love languages, thinking about it, like wasn't physical touch.
Got it.
My grandma actually was the only one out of like my mom and my two grandparents. She was heavy on the physical touch, and when I think about my love languages, I am quality time and physical touch. So I
Mhm.
think that's why I gravitate so much towards my grandma, because when I see her, it's just like all hugs and all of that, right? So, but then my mom, I've only seen her cry once my entire life, and I think my mom tried to play both roles as far as like she was always working growing up, so my grandparents really raised me. By the time she got home, she was like the disciplinarian and the just like the breadwinner, right? In a lot of ways she played like these traditional male roles,
Yeah.
and instead of showing emotion in many ways, my mom uh went towards comedy. Like literally someone could die, like
Mm,
her father passed away, my grandfather, and I didn't see her cry during it.
I'm
And I
so.
feel like she was trying to be tough for me. I don't know.
Hmm.
But her defense mechanism is always comedy. Like it could be the saddest moment in the room, but she would try to make everyone else laugh, maybe to make
Okay.
herself feel better. I'm not too sure. But same thing for my grandfather. Like I've never seen him be emotional. Like I've never seen him cry. I've never seen him uh just like even I mean smile, yeah, like happy emotion. But I've never seen sad emotion. So I think part of it is that. But also part of it growing up is like the cool guys growing up, whether it be like middle school or high school, they were the tough guys. Like it
Right.
was cool to be part of a tough neighborhood. It was cool to be like quote unquote a thug or be in a gang and stuff like that. Like and those dudes don't cry, you know what I mean? So I think it's a combination of like family, at least for me, like family, but also like upbringings and like who you're seeing in your friends groups.
Got it. I love that you said that you didn't see much hugging in your family. So for me, it was the opposite, but I'll explain why it was the opposite. Like I
Yeah.
said, my parents have been married a long time. My parents didn't really hug us. I I've I don't recall being young and my mom and dad really hugging us. But my parents are extremely loving with one another. They're
Mm.
extremely loving with one another, and the words that they use with one another is it's literally you're watching like a love story with them. And so
Oh.
I know what love should sound like. I know what it should look like between a husband and a wife. But my parents, and I don't know if it's maybe because my parents are so much older. My parents are in their 80s. When they had me and my twin sister, we were the last ones. They were much, much older. And so they were much stricter. And so I don't know if that plays a part in it as well. So that loving part where you have parents that are telling you that they love you and they're hugging you, I didn't get that part, but I saw it, with them with each other. And so that's what I saw. But with them parenting us, it was they didn't have any boys, they had women, so they had to show us to be strong because it's something that was always said. It was like you have to be strong, you have to be self-sufficient, and so they raised us to be very strong women. And so crying, no, I didn't see that. And just like you, I never saw my dad cry. My dad is one of those tough people that, he doesn't cry. My dad doesn't say I love you, but he'll write a birthday card that says I love
Oh,
you.
yeah, yeah.
So he doesn't say it to us, but he writes. And it's how he shows his love. He showed his love in other ways. One of the things, I'm lucky, and I say I'm lucky and I'm blessed. My dad taught me how to ride a bike. And so he
Oh,
showed his love that way. So when I think about it, he showed me how to ride a bike. You know,
yeah, yeah.
he showed me how to drive. He taught me how to drive. So my dad showed love in that way. When I saw my dad cry was, to be honest, recently. He's had a couple siblings passed away, but I never saw him cry, when these particular siblings passed. But we just had an uncle who passed about 3 months ago, and I had to give my dad the news, and my dad fell on the floor crying. I mean, my dad broke down crying. And I was shocked because my dad doesn't cry. He's strong. He doesn't show emotions. And I asked, like, why did this particular sibling who passed, why did it hurt him most? And it was because he's only 2 years older than my oldest sister, and he grew up with my dad. My dad had raised him for a part of his life. And so for him, it was like his son had died. And so that's when I saw my dad for the first time break down and cry. And I said, "Oh my God, my father has emotions, because just like your grandfather and your mom, my dad uses comedy a lot for when things are going bad. If something happens that's tragic, he uses comedy a lot."
Yeah. It's weird. Like I never thought about this, but I growing up, I didn't really see a positive, like loving relationship. Like my mom, my dad were separated. So my mom was single. And then my grandparents, they lived together, but they're just like this, they were this old grumpy couple. Like they were just like always yelling at each other. And I had to be the moderator and saying like, y'all, like, please stop. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure they loved each other, but there were a lot of things that happened back in the day as well that I'm sure, led to them potentially having a bunch of arguments. Uh,
Uh-huh.
but it's so interesting. I never thought about that. Yeah, I've never, yeah, like growing up, I didn't see like a loving relationship. Really interesting. I think about it now.
Wow. And you know what happened? When I left Mr. X and I was going through the divorce,
Mr. X.
I was really upset with my parents. I was mad at them. I was
Why?
angry because, you know what? Growing up, and I said this to them, they never had an argument in front of my sisters and I. So I grew up with this expectation of what marriage should look like. And all I had seen was a beautiful, loving relationship where my dad calls my mom his queen. He goes above and beyond, to do everything for my mom. My mom says jump, and he'll say how high. And so for me, that's what I thought that marriage should look like. And I remember confronting them and saying, you told me, and what I saw was that marriage was perfect. It was amazing. You never argue and all this other stuff. And my parents were like, who told you that? We never told you that marriage was perfect and that you don't have arguments. And I said, I don't ever recall both of you having an argument in front of us. What we saw was, if my mom said no to something, it was no. My father would stick to that. They worked in unison, and my parents were like, no, we never said that marriage was perfect. They're like, what we made a decision was that we were never going to argue in front of you, because what you needed to see was two people that, in spite of the issues that come, that we still love and respect one another. We would have our arguments in the bedroom where you wouldn't have to be exposed to that, because you don't have to listen to or worry about if we had financial troubles, if him and I weren't seeing eye to eye. And it made total sense to me. It made total sense to me. But I had an issue with something where I still do think that children need to see that there are points of contention in a relationship, and that you are able to work past the problem, because you can't, it's unrealistic to show everything to be perfect. It's
Yeah.
unrealistic, because what you're creating is unrealistic expectations.
Yeah. No, yeah, that is really interesting. And I do love the fact that you went to go seek help as far as therapy for all of the sort of all of the issues, not issues, but just experiences that you went through. Not
Yeah.
only that, but coaching. And it's so interesting because to me, like it really ties into what you're doing now. Like you're
Mhm.
sort of giving that back in so many ways through so many of your businesses that you're doing and through entrepreneurship. Like talk to me a little bit about why you're running a lot of the coaching and businesses that you're doing now. Like did that previous impact just sort of like helped you through the thought process of like understanding what you're going to do moving forward?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. So at the end of the day, after doing therapy and coaching and trying to figure out what my next was going to be, where I was going to go with my life, what my purpose was, I realized that my purpose was to help women just like myself, who are in a point of transition in their life, because it's a point that I know all too well, to find purpose and to step into it confidently and to become warrior queens. And that's what I do. And so I own three businesses. The first one is called The Enriched Mind. That's where I do my life coaching through. So I do a lot of business coaching and life coaching, and I do a lot of keynote speaking. And so The Enriched Mind was born out of that, to help women, especially women who are either in middle level management and are trying to step into executive level roles, or are leaving the corporate world altogether and want to become entrepreneurs and they don't know how to do it. I help women in that respect. Then the second company I have is called the Yoshida Academy. And I co founded this academy with an amazing business partner that I have. Her name is Minue Yoshida. And we found ourselves um, in a place where we both were starting our own businesses. I had been an entrepreneur for 17 years previously. I was doing financial services, by the way. I was doing financial services in my former company. I was running a lot of the training and development, creating the programs. And I realized, hey, I'm amazing at this. And through coaching, what I realized was that I needed to go back and get my certification as a coach, because I was already doing it in my previous role. And so for me, it was just a natural transition to move into that. And I said, hey, the only way that I can help women and coach them through this process is by getting certified, right? Because certification is important. And then creating programs that help women and men, because it's not just for women and men, right, get their lives together and start their businesses. And so I met my business partner, who was also in the same point that I was, and we realized that there was a lot of similarities in what we were doing. She's a public speaking coach. She also does business coaching. So there was a lot of cross crossing over of what we were doing in our services. And we said, oh my gosh, why don't we put together an academy and create programs that are helping people, right, to start their own businesses, to become amazing public speakers. And so this is how the academy was born. And so what we do is that we do a lot of training with corporations as well. We do training in diversity and inclusion. It's something that I am big on. I work with women. It's what I eat, breathe, it's just part of me. And so for me, helping women step into executive level roles is very important, and helping corporations see why it's important to put women in executive level roles. And so we do a lot of diversity and inclusion training that has to do with leadership, it has to do with promoting minorities into executive level roles and into management. We also do training around professional development, so skill sets, right? Doing a lot of upskill in communication, in negotiation. And so the second company. And the third, which I am so happy to talk to you about, is called Warrior Queen Cosmetics. And this one I co-founded with my twin sister. And basically, this cosmetics line is geared towards educating people about warrior queens, women we consider to be warrior queens that you wouldn't normally be exposed to and that you've never heard of. And it's warrior queens around the world, everyday women who are literally making it happen in their lives. And so they have had some type of recognition in their particular fields. And so we're highlighting them through our makeup, through our cosmetics line. And so we launched that officially in March, and we have our pre-launch coming up in January. And so I'm excited about that.
That's so cool. I mean, you're creating representation in so many ways. Like the obvious one is you, right? Because you have this brand, but in a way, like you're also the brand. And then with the cosmetic brand, I mean, obviously a lot of things, but with the cosmetic brand as well, like you're highlighting people within the community that potentially look like you as well. Like how important is it to you like to create that representation that is kind of missing?
It's extremely important because I'm going to tell you, as an Afro Latina, one of the things that I have found, even in my speaking engagements, is that usually I'll be on a panel and I'm the only one who looks like me.
Wow.
And I'm the only one who either speaks Spanish, who was born outside of the country, which is the funniest thing, and who has certain experiences, right, that I bring to the table where I'm like, well, there's a group of us who don't know really where we fit in and who don't know how to create a space for ourselves where we are being included. And for me, that's very important, not only as a woman, but as a Latina, as an Afro Latina, that my voice is being heard and that in turn, I'm bringing up other women as well. One of the things that I remember when I first started doing training in corporations on my own was walking into a place where there were about 20 executives and there were only 3 women in there. And only one woman looked like me. And I remember walking in, and before even opening up my mouth, all 3 women were clapping for me. And I remember when I walked out, the one woman who looked like me walked out and she said, "Oh my goodness, thank you so much for showing up looking the way that you do," right? Because I walked in there with my pajon, with my with my curly hair. I remember people telling me nobody's ever gonna hire you, looking like that. And I remember this woman said to me, "You are the first woman that they bring in here, first who looks like you, and secondly who comes in with your hair looking like that, when we have policies in place where we can't wear our hair natural." She said, "You broke all types of standards, with this." And she said, "You literally empowered me." Listening to that and having another woman say that to me, it helps me every day to get up and say, if I can inspire one woman today, then I've lived with purpose.
I mean, just I love that. I mean, shout out to her for the acknowledgement too. I mean, I'm just wondering, like, imagine if you didn't show up like that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, imagine if you followed just like the expectation and the standards that we're so accustomed to following. Like that person, I don't know, would have looked at you like, damn, just another one kind of faking it. You know what I mean? Or just like another one that doesn't represent me.
That's right. That's right. And so for me, it's very important, Pavel, that wherever I am, whatever it is that I'm doing, that I am representing those women who look like me, who don't have a voice, who don't feel comfortable enough in their own skin to show up authentically them. It's important for me to show up so that they can be inspired to do it for themselves. Because I hear it time and time again. We are in 2020 and we are still having conversations and creating ridiculous laws that allow me to walk into a space looking the way that I do. Well, where is the law? Show me the law that was created that says that I can't look like myself. Like, show me the law, the actual law that was created by the governing body of the US that says this, because this is ridiculous.
Yeah. And I'm sure not all of those experiences are positive, right? Like as an entrepreneur, you can create your own rules, but you also, work with corporations. Like, are there certain instances where you're like, maybe I shouldn't do this, right? But not only appearance based, like you mentioned, a big part of who you are is that you're funny, right? But like showing that humor, right? Are you like, maybe I shouldn't do that because it's unprofessional, right? Like, how do you think about those certain things when you walk into rooms?
So it's so funny that you say that, because I had an experience recently where literally it was for Hispanic Heritage Month, and it was for an organization um, that we had to do a specific program for, and because you know um, the White House passed this bill where you can't, it's in diversity and inclusion. We were doing the workshop in diversity and inclusion. They passed this bill that you can't say certain things that for them is considered unpatriotic, where you can't talk about white privilege, you can't talk about your experience to the extent where it makes America look bad. And I remember saying, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. I said, I don't know. It had me questioning whether or not I could take on this contract, because I said, I'm going to bring my authentic self. I am very respectful. So I just want to put this out there. I am very respectful that if a corporation says there are certain things you can't say and certain things you can't do, that I don't do it. But just because you told me I can't say that that's a cat doesn't mean that I can't say, that animal that says meow, that has like little furs and whiskers. And so I find creative ways to still be authentic, but uh to stay true to what I'm doing and what I'm saying, and that the message hits home, that is still being respectful with the company. Now, if it's just too extreme, I won't work with a company. Just to put it out there. And I have been very, very vocal about this. I will tell a corporation, if you're asking me to completely change myself and not bring authentically me, I don't mind leaving money on the table, because this is the reason why I became an entrepreneur, because I wanted to live by my own rules. And if I'm going to say, that I do X, Y, and Z, and I want the next woman to follow me, I want her to know that she should be able to say no to things that aren't aligned to what she believes in.
Wait, that's crazy. One, I didn't know that about the White House. That new rule.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my goodness. Let me tell you, you have to look it up. Like, they literally passed a memorandum. I'm gonna send you the link. Yeah, they passed a memorandum that literally you there. Yeah, so they reduced a lot of diversity and inclusion trainings for a lot of their agencies, like state governed agencies. And so the the company we were going to do this thing for was a state agency. And so, oh my goodness, so much red tape. And I said, this is ridiculous.
That's crazy. I did not know that. Yeah, I definitely want to share that
Yeah.
with everyone.
Yeah.
And oh, I forgot what I was gonna say. Wait, White House. There was something. Oh, wait, people actually tell you not to say certain things?
Yeah. So we are told, you can't say X, you can't say Y, you can't say Z. And so that
Well, like
gets
outside of like the White House situation, you said like other.
other
Yeah,
corporations.
really?
So the diversity and inclusion space is an interesting one. Yeah, because you have to be very careful with what it is that you're saying, and you want to make sure that you're not offending a whole group of people. But there are some red tapes that borderline on, well, if you want me to talk about diversity and inclusion, this red tape totally negates what I'm going to say about diversity and inclusion. Like it
Mhm.
literally takes it out of the park. And so navigating through that can be difficult at times, but it's like I said, you just find creative ways of getting your point across and still saying it without saying what they told you you can't say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, well, I'm glad that someone's navigating it, and if I can choose one person to navigate those waters and do the work that you're doing, it would be you. So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing, and it truly is inspiring. I want to end with this last question, and you might have touched on this already, but if anything else comes up, feel free to share. But you've been on this journey, and you are where you are right now. Seems to be comfortable and confident in who you are. As you look forward, though, what's one thing that continues to inspire, continues to empower you to be your most authentic self?
So I am going to end with this. What continues to inspire me and to move forward, I'm going to say, is seeing women step into roles in every area. I mean, what just happened recently with Kamala Harris becoming vice president. I mean, if anything, that is for every woman, every brown and black girl, for every person, right, LGBTQ who has been told that they can't be somebody or do something. It just inspires me because I see that women are finally taking their place. They're finally owning spaces that we weren't allowed to own before. And it inspires me because everything that I do, even with my makeup line, when I think about Warrior Queen Cosmetics, is exactly that. It's just helping people to believe that they can be whoever they want to be and that they can do anything that they put their mind into, and that the stars are actually not that far away. You can actually shoot for it and get it. And so that's what I want people to leave away with.